talking to you, you're like, well, why is this guy giving us advice on interviews? So talk about that. And then I've got sort of, 5 steps with some stories and stuff, maybe stuff you've heard before, maybe stuff you've never heard in your entire life. And then we'll open up for questions. We'll talk about it because it's a tough market out there. So, Cody asked why, or who are you, and why are you talking to us? So my name is Jason Atwood. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arcus. We're a we're salesforce consultants. Been around for about 14 years. Why am I talking to you? Well, because I've hired, I think, 120, 130 people and probably interviewed another. No, it's funny. You don't show up to an interview, with your manager next to you. I've actually seen one of my employees at one of these sessions. And I was like, wait, why are you looking for interview tips? So the first thing is really to be honest, right? And this is, in the Salesforce ecosystem, that's about what you know, right? We have, 10 industry clouds, we have technologies, we have all these things. We have certs, we have trailhead, we have badges, we have super badges. But what you actually know and can do on the platform, you need to be honest about. Because what you don't want is to get hired and then they say, oh, try to do this thing. And you're like, I don't know what you're doing. So really be honest about the technologies and the clouds that you know and the ones you don't know. So that's sort of the big tip, right? Know what you know, and that should come back with experiences, right? You should be able to tie something you know, not just because you passed the and got the badge or got the certification, but how did you apply that knowledge to some sort of problem set or some sort of experience that you did. So first one, just be honest about what you know. When I catch people when they don't know things, it's not great. And lastly, this is sort of the tying that in. You're going to say, here's what I know, and here's how I applied it. Here's how I solve problems. When I'm hiring people, the number one thing I want is someone who can solve a problem. It's getting louder, and that means across anything. Whether you're going to an administration or a BA, you want to be in sales, or you want to be in service, you want to be a consultant. Don't be a consultant. It's very difficult. It's a difficult job. Don't do it. But I'm always looking for the person who, even if they don't know something, they can solve the problem. They can figure it out. All right, step 2, more AI. This one, it's funny, I was just on a podcast coming out next week or 2 weeks from now talking all about this stuff, so it's a little bit of a precursor. But I find that now, especially now, post-COVID, post-work from home, post-remote work, really working and understanding the culture of the organization and how you fit in it. And I think there's a two-way thing here. When you're talking to employers or when you're hiring people, not only knowing how their culture will fit you, but also vice versa. And so one of the big pieces of advice I give people is show up with questions about culture, right? Don't just say, do you have a good culture, right? Who here is going to raise their hand and say, I have a bad culture probably because you're looking for jobs, maybe you are, but generally, if you ask them, if you ask me, I'll say, I have a great culture, right? If I ask any organization, they'll say, we have a great culture. So I say flip it on its head and say, what are the 3 things you did last week that prove that you have a good culture? And they might go, huh? And they might not know, right? You want to hear from them, the hiring organization. There's Nick. Hey, Nick. An ex-Archie. How that culture fits you, right? What kind of it? They're all going to say we try work-life balance. They're all going to say that we empower people. They're all going to say that we have great things. I think you should really ask the questions of how. Tell me how you're doing it. And the next question, if they're on top of that, is what are you doing in the future? What are the things you're doing at your organization? You can ask this of the CEO, you can ask this of the HR, you can ask anybody. What are you doing in your organization to keep your culture good? To make sure it's fostered. Because culture isn't something you set up. Let's make a joke about CRM. It's not something you just set up, but you shouldn't just set up and leave your CRM. But you shouldn't just set up and leave your culture. Your culture needs something that is constantly being paid attention to and fed in. It's like a beast, right? And if it's not being nourished, and it's not being talked to, and it's not being helped, then it's gonna die. And that's what happens to a lot of organizations. So that's my second tip. So it's how you fit, right? And then the values. Obviously, Salesforce and most companies now are very clear with their values. That's great. They write them up on a piece of paper. They put them up on their website. Sorry, again, Salesforce people. But what the question should be in the interview is, tell me something you've done that hits one of these values. Literally something you've done. Tell me. And then have them go, oh, I have to actually think about it, not just read from a slide. So really, really focusing in on the culture. That's step 2. All right, step 3 of AI art. All right, I'm gonna throw these all up there so I can talk about all of them. So be prepared. Seems obvious. You show up to an interview and they're like, of course I'm prepared. You'll be surprised how many people show up and are not prepared for the interview. First, you need to know your resume or your LinkedIn or whatever. There should be no question that is asked of you that you can't answer very quickly from your resume. You should be like, oh, I don't remember that. Granted, resumes are getting a little bit old-fashioned at this point, but from your experiences and things like that, you should be able to answer. I would suggest you reread your resume right before every single interview. Literally skim it. You should have it top of your mind. Second is, and this sounds obvious, but so many people show up to interviews without good questions. I get to the end of an interview and I say, hey, okay, do you have any questions for me? And they're like, no, I'm good. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not, right? I'm not happy, right? You didn't even bring a question. The best interviewers come prepared with good questions. Hey, I read your blog post the other week about blah, 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 blah. Can you tell me why you wrote that? Right? Something that's connected, something that makes it look like you did homework and that you're really interested in the company you're going to. So you should know them, know the personality, know the company, something. You were in the news, you were on the blog, I saw you on LinkedIn, whatever. Have really good questions, and not just the questions of, I guess this is the 3rd or 4th or 5th tip. Know to ask who about what questions. When you're interviewing with me at the end of the process, you're interviewing the CEO, don't ask me about comp, right? When you want to do that with the HR person. So have the right questions for the right people, because you're going to go through multiple stages. So don't just show up and ask, the wrong question, or don't have questions. The best people have, literally, they've written, I can tell on the phone, I can hear them, they have like, oh wait, let me go to my question number 3. I'm like, okay, good, you're prepared, you've come prepared. And then this is kind of coming back to the other one. You should have just really quick stories about your experiences and things you've done. When I coach people on getting into the Salesforce ecosystem, there's a lot about, well, where should I spend my time, right? Should I spend it on badges? Should I spend it on certifications? Who here has a certification? Raise a hand. Keep it up if you have more than 5, more than 10. All right, more than 15. All right, I got 15. All right, so certs, badges, experience, it's all part of it. You have to have all of it. I tell people, spend 20% of your time on certs, 20% on badges, 30% of your time on certs, 50% of your time on experience. Because ultimately, we hire for experience. The other 2 we can make up, right? I've not hired people with 22 certifications. Just they couldn't do the job. They didn't have the skill set. So 20, 30, 50, take that, write it down. You're all good. All right, let's go to number 4. This one is, again, I should call this the 5 most obvious things that you should bring to your interview, but so many people don't. And this one's all about communication. And so when I'm hiring someone, I'm thinking about not only how they communicate with me, but how they're going to communicate with a client, right? And if they can't communicate with me, if they can't keep a conversation going, if they can't be personable, if they can't bring out some sort of something out of our conversation, I know they won't be able to do it with a client. You go, well, you're in consulting, that's different. No, it's not. It doesn't matter what part of the system, you need to be able to communicate well. And that's both verbally and written. So for communication, right, if you are in the technical role, you should be throwing out those acronyms. You should be talking about them. Again, don't lie. Don't throw out an LLM if you don't know what that means or you don't know how they're built. Don't throw out CPQ if you don't know what that is. But you should be able to talk the technical talk, especially if you're going into the tech side of this industry. This is my big hint. Here it is. There's a lot of hints in this, or a lot of tips. I test people on their empathy. When I start the call, I always bring up something in my life, like, my dog was sick yesterday, or I tripped over the rug, or I had a bad quesadilla yesterday, something. I just throw in something random. It's usually true, like there's something, or I didn't get good sleep last night. And then I listen for empathy. And you'll see so many people be like, oh, that's cool. Or the people be like, oh, that stinks, like, and they'll relate. They'll come back with their, like, oh yeah, I had an empanada the other day and it made me sick for the weekend. And then you have this conversation. So really bringing empathy into your conversation and your interview. I know it sounds strange, but it works, because then you're connecting with somebody, right? You're empathizing, you're listening, and that's the other thing. Really be a good listener. I think it's it, yeah. So, being a good listener doesn't mean saying, yeah. That's not listening. Listening is quietly taking what they're saying slowly, and then sometimes repeating it back. There's a technique called mirroring that if you want to go down a path there's a big path you go down, but repeating back things they said and coming back to them, it's great, right? Someone who's on that call who like takes notes as they're listening to me and then comes back and says, hey, you said this 20 minutes ago. I'd really like to come back to that. I'm like, that person was listening. They were paying attention to what I was saying, and it's a very good skill set. It will work anywhere. All right, I'm checking my time here. Oh, I'm doing great. I'll leave some time for questions. 5. All right, one more. Ready? Follow-ups. Again, you're taught this in high school, you're taught this in college, you're taught this by every career advisor that you need to follow up. Do you know how many people don't follow up? Like 50% of the people don't follow up. If you have the hiring person's email, you send them an email within 2 business days. 2 business days. If you have an interview on a Friday, you have until Monday or Tuesday afternoon. 2 business days. And when you follow up, you don't just say thank you. You bring back concepts, you bring back stuff you talked about. Sometimes you ask more questions, although I don't like that because then I have to answer the questions. But you just have something that makes it look like you paid attention, you thought about it, you're excited, because the difference between you and another person could be that email. I have not hired people because they did not follow up. Perfectly qualified. And I said they didn't follow up. That's it. It's over. I do have a little test. I won't tell this one, but I do have a little test I give people before the interview. It's like a paying attention test, and if they don't pay attention, that too, then I don't even get on the interview with them. So you do have to follow up. 2 business days, that's the rule. Include the takeaways. If there's stuff from the call, if you talked about the blog post, if you talked about that cool podcast, if you talked about some book, like the best interviewers come back and like, and you mentioned that book that you were really interested in. I took a look at it on Amazon and I'm put it on my reading list or whatever. Just something to show that you have set the guide. You're above the other person who never followed up or just said thank you for the interview. I really look forward to hearing from your hiring manager on my salary or whatever, right? You want to have something really personal. Also, know who you're following up to, right? You might write something different to me, then you're going to write to the hiring manager, then you're going to write to the HR. But if you follow up at every time, you will look better. And again, it seems so obvious, but so many people don't do it. And a great follow-up can set someone apart, right? When I'm looking at 10 candidates, the best follow-up could be the person that gets the job. And then next steps, right? So we're always looking for this. This is a great technique no matter where you are. But if there are things you're looking for, there's a timeline, ask them like, hey, when can I look to hear from you? You know, is there any next steps I need to follow up with? Is there anything else I can provide to you to make sure that this would be a great place for me to work, right? So providing all of that in your interview process, super, super, super important. Again, the most obvious things in the world, but so many people don't do any of these and they don't get jobs. All right, you want to know more about Arcus? That's our website. That's our